Hi folks, I thought I'd make a little video on the general subject of temptation, addiction, vices, this sort of thing, to try and offer you maybe a little nugget of wisdom that I have personally found helpful for my life. I know this isn't going to be some big confession video. I'm not interested in airing my dirty laundry to anybody. But we all have our vices, don't we? Well, maybe you don't, but I'm betting that a lot of you are just like me. Essentially, I don't think this is going to be very complicated. Essentially, the thing that helps me the most is the recognition that the worst thing I can do if I want to overcome something in my life and quit something that's bad for me, the worst thing that I can do is to say to myself, I will never do this again. To make a rule for myself that I mustn't break. Because vices are pleasurable things, and that's why they're temptations. And it just seems to be the way our minds work, that if you declare something that's pleasurable, if you declare it forbidden, you energize it. And what I mean by that is you make it twice as alluring, twice as tempting, maybe 4 times as tempting as it was before. And you practically ensure that you're going to fail in the task of staying away from it. Now, I'm willing to bet that a lot of you are saying to yourselves, you know what? This does match my experience. Unless you're the sort of person who just wants to give in to every vice that you have and really not care about the consequences. So I'm going to do an odd thing here. I'm going to read from the Bible. I'm going to read the words of the Apostle Paul from Romans chapter 7, because he echoes. Even though I'm not a Bible believer, there are still certain nuggets of wisdom in the Bible. He echoes what I'm saying here in a way that I think, at least in part, it's worded quite well. So I'm going to begin with verse, let's see. In verse 7, halfway through the verse it begins, I would not have known what sin was except through the law. For I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, do not covet. But sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, produced in me every kind of covetous desire. For apart from law, sin is dead. Once I was alive apart from law, but when the commandment came, sin sprang to life and I died. I found that the very commandment that was intended to bring life actually brought death. For sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, deceived me, and through the commandment put me to death. So then the law is holy, and the commandment is holy, righteous, and good. Did that which is good then become death to me? By no means. But in order that sin might be recognized as sin, it produced death in me, through what was good, so that through the commandment sin might become utterly sinful. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am unspiritual, sold as a slave to sin. I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do, but what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For what I do is not the good I want to do. No, the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. Now if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. So, Paul seems to want to externalize that part of himself and call it sin, like it's not a part of himself. But, he recognizes the very same thing that I recognize and that I'm betting that you recognize. It's that when you're told not to do something, that's when you really want to do it. I had an experience not that long ago where there were a couple of kids. One of them, and I didn't really know them, but they recognized me, and one of them said, "I saw you on YouTube." And this is, I'm talking locally here. And I really don't like kids being on my YouTube channel, because what I do is really not for kids. We're talking about deep and controversial things here that require a great deal of critical thinking. It's the domain of adult thought, So I immediately said, you shouldn't be on that there. I don't want to talk about that. It's not really for kids. And of course, as soon as I say this thing, the other guy who's with him, he's totally interested now. I energized it inadvertently, totally inadvertently. I made sure practically that other kid was gonna log on to the internet and find my YouTube channel. Didn't mean to do it, but it happened. So it's just this, we seem to have this, I don't know if you would call it, this is like a term that Alan Watts uses, or incurable rascality. I don't know if that's a good term, but there is definitely something within the psyche that regards the forbidden as something it wants. And I guess that's also the allure of the aesthetics that come with occultism. To an extent, I think I even use that a little bit. You want to create a kind of a sense of mystique or mystery about yourself, in a playful kind of way. But it's just one of those things. So, if your problem is, if your problem is alcohol intake, that you find that you can't stop, you're drinking too much and you can't stop, the worst thing you could probably do is to say to yourself, "I'll never take another drink." And it doesn't matter that it's not a commandment coming from God. That doesn't really matter. It's a commandment that you have made to yourself. And if you break it, you're going to feel terribly guilty, in the same way that you would if you broke a commandment of God, if you were a believer in that sort of thing. But you also energize the desire for drink by saying, I will never drink. I'm guessing this applies to any particular vice. That don't say to yourself, "I'll never do this again." But you see, there's a kind of middle ground. I'm not advocating, that we don't overcome our own vices. Of course, that's what you want to do. But there's a middle ground here. And the middle ground that I have personally found most helpful in my life is to generally recognize the harm that I'm doing to myself through some particular indulgence that's pleasurable but not good for me. I recognize the harm that it's doing. I make a general effort to stay away from it, but I also say to myself that if I have the occasional indulgence, it's really not that big a deal. And you find that you have far, far more success than you do when you say to yourself, "No, this is forbidden, I will stay away from this." So just an observation. Maybe you'll find it useful for your life.